It was 11 p.m. when the man walked into the police station. His eyes were filled with despair, and his shoulders slumped over like he had just carried the weight of the world for years. When the officers asked him what he wanted, he looked at them and calmly said, "I need to confess to a murder." Before they could say a word, he continued, "I know what I did is terrible and unforgivable, but I want to make things right, so arrest me now." Then he began to explain where he committed the murder, the exact time, and even what the victim's body looked like. Everything seemed so real, so precise that the police decided to take him at his word and send a team to check out the scene. But when they arrived there, it seemed as if the man had made up the whole thing. They found no evidence of a crime, or even a victim. So why would someone confess to a murder that never happened? The police questioned the man further, but he only insisted that they go back to the crime scene, which was in an isolated forest on the outskirts of town. He was adamant that they would find the body exactly where he said it would be. But when the police returned, the forest was empty. It was like the man had pulled them into some kind of twisted game, and he was enjoying their confusion. "This is crazy," one of the officers thought. "Why would someone waste our time like this? We have actual cases to work on." And then it hit him. What if this guy was trying to lead us away from the real crime scene? He quickly radioed the rest of the team to reconvene at headquarters. They needed to figure out what was going on. As the rest of the team pulled up to the station, the man sitting in the interrogation room suddenly stood up, his face drained of color. He started pacing around the room, muttering to himself about how he had to get out of there, that he had to disappear. One of the officers stepped forward and asked him to calm down, but the man didn't seem to hear him. He was too busy searching for an escape, looking for a way out. The officer reached out to grab him, but he dodged the officer's grasp and bolted for the door. Adrenaline pumping through his veins, he burst through it and ran down the hallway. Alarms blared behind him as he sprinted toward the stairs. He didn't care where he was going. He just needed to get away. He pushed past people in the lobby, knocking them over, sending papers flying. Finally, he burst out the front doors and disappeared into the night. At the same time, the rest of the team was arriving. A sergeant immediately called for backup and ordered everyone to split up and search the area. Meanwhile, the detective in charge couldn't help but feel like this was more than just a simple murder cover-up. Something about the man's behavior didn't sit right with him. The way he had confessed so matter-of-factly, the way he had described the crime scene in such detail, it was all too rehearsed. And then there was the fact that he had confessed to a crime that didn't happen. That didn't make sense either. So why had he tried to escape? And what was he hiding? As the hours passed, the search continued without any luck. The man had vanished without a trace. It was as if he had never been there at all. Back at the station, the team went through every detail of the case, trying to piece together what had happened. The detective in charge pulled up the security footage and studied it frame by frame, hoping to catch a glimpse of something he had missed. But the more he watched, the more confused he became. The man had come in alone and left alone. There was no one else involved. So why would he have confessed to a crime that didn't happen? Was he insane? Days turned into weeks, and the case grew colder with each passing moment. The police had no new leads, and the detective in charge was starting to lose hope. He had worked on hundreds of cases during his career, but none of them had ever been like this. This one was driving him crazy. He couldn't let go of the nagging feeling that there was something more to the case, some hidden meaning behind the man's confession. He went back to the beginning, the original crime scene. Maybe he had missed something, some small detail that could have made all the difference. As he walked through the forest, his eyes scanning the ground, he noticed something strange. The trees here are pine trees, the detective thought, but these footprints were made by a different kind of shoe. Someone had been here before, but what had they been doing? Had they been following the man? The detective crouched down and examined the tracks more closely. They were deep, as if the person wearing them had been carrying a heavy load. And the more he looked, the more he realized that the prints matched the shoes the man had been wearing. But that wasn't possible. The man had confessed to being alone. So who had left the footprints? Suddenly, the detective felt a surge of adrenaline. Could this be the break he had been waiting for? He quickly radioed for backup and ordered them to bring in the security footage from every home in the area. As the footage played, he watched intently, searching for a familiar set of footprints. And then he saw them. In one of the videos, a man was walking away from the camera. He was carrying something heavy in his arms, something that looked like a large suitcase. But the detective knew that wasn't a suitcase. It was a body. The detective had finally solved the case, but there was still one question that remained. Who was the killer, and why had he tried to frame the innocent man? The answer to the first question was easy. It was the man from the video. But who was he? And what was his motive? The answer to that question wasn't so clear. The detective went back to the beginning, the original confession. Maybe there was something he had missed, some clue that could have led him to the killer. As he watched the tape again, he noticed something strange. The man had been wearing a blue shirt, but in the security footage, he had been wearing a red shirt. So how could it be the same person? The detective paused the tape and looked more closely. He was wearing a blue shirt, all right, but it wasn't the same shirt. There was something underneath it, something he hadn't noticed before. He rewound the tape and looked again. It was a badge. The man had been wearing a badge under his blue shirt. Suddenly, it all clicked. The man wasn't a witness. He was an accomplice. He had seen the crime and was trying to hide it. But why? Why would a police officer help cover up a murder? The detective had finally caught up to the killer, but the motive remained a mystery. The killer had planned everything perfectly. He had made sure there was no evidence at the crime scene. He had even taken measures to ensure that the security footage was destroyed. But the detective was able to piece together what had happened. The killer had staged the entire thing. He had killed the victim and then set the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. But why? What was the motive? The detective had finally cornered the killer, but the motive remained a mystery. The killer had planned everything perfectly. He had made sure there was no evidence at the crime scene. He had even taken measures to ensure that the security footage was destroyed. But the detective was able to piece together what had happened. The killer had staged the entire thing. He had killed the victim and then set the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. But why? What was the motive? The detective had finally cornered the killer, but the motive remained a mystery. The killer had planned everything perfectly. He had made sure there was no evidence at the crime scene. He had even taken measures to ensure that the security footage was destroyed. But the detective was able to piece together what had happened. The killer had staged the entire thing. He had killed the victim and then set the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. But why? What was the motive? The killer had confessed to the murder because he had nothing to lose. He had already killed the victim and framed the innocent man. So what did he have to fear? The detective had finally caught up to the killer, but the motive remained a mystery. The killer had planned everything perfectly. He had made sure there was no evidence at the crime scene. He had even taken measures to ensure that the security footage was destroyed. But the detective was able to piece together what had happened. The killer had staged the entire thing. He had killed the victim and then set the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. But why? What was the motive? And there you have it, folks. Another thrilling mystery solved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. See you next time.